grab your attention like little else. The people who inhabit the criminal underworld have always made fascinating literary characters, and who hasn't imagined themselves as an amateur detective from time to time? When there's a case to be solved or a villain's plan to carry out, we're all completely hooked. One of the earliest pieces of crime fiction is from the 1001 Nights, the collection of folk tales from the Middle East. It features a story known as the Three Apples, where a woman's dead body is discovered in a locked box in the Tigris River. The local ruler gives his appointed authority Jaffa just 3 days to solve the mystery, or he will face execution, a situation that would stress even the greats of detective fiction. But unlike most whodunit stories, the perpetrator is revealed early on, and the rest of the tale explains the series of events that led to the woman's killing. The more conventional detective story that we know today would only emerge thanks to the American writer Edgar Allan Poe and his story, The Murders in the Rue Morgue. The ingenious are always fanciful, and the truly imaginative never otherwise than analytic. The story takes place on the fictional Rue Morgue in Paris, a fitting place for a series of grisly murders. Poe's amateur detective is C. Auguste Dupin, who endeavours to solve what became known as a locked room mystery, where the villains are killed in a room locked from the inside, and it's unclear how the perpetrator could have entered and then escaped. In Poe's story, Dupin picks on some unusual clues and deducts that the perpetrator was a giant orangutan. The first detective novel certainly didn't have an obvious conclusion. Edgar Allan Poe's tale has seen many adaptations over the years, including versions starring Bela Lugosi and Jason Robards, but these differ wildly from the original story, and only 1954's Phantom of the Rue Morgue sticks to the tale that started a whole new genre.
That's right. An animal. What? You saw those bodies at the morgue. What kind of an animal? An animal with hands. An ape. An ape? Gigantic. Powerful. Untamed. A phantom of your imagination, of course. Born out of pure desperation, a phantom ape. A real ape.
Poe continued with stories featuring C. Auguste Dupin with The Mystery of Marie Roget and The Purloined Letter. He became an inspiration for all successive fictional detectives, and the structure Edgar Allan Poe created, where our hero and their trusty assistant, who often acts as the narrator, solve a complex crime for the reader's enjoyment, became the basis for a whole new genre of literature. After the murders in the Rue Morgue, English author Wilkie Collins became a successful detective novelist himself with The Moonstone, which deals with the unexplained theft of a diamond. More and more writers began embracing this new genre, but it would be a doctor named Arthur Conan Doyle who created the greatest detective of all time with Sherlock Holmes.
Well, first of all, about the Sherlock Holmes stories, they came about in this way. I was quite a young doctor at the time. I had, of course, a scientific training, and I used occasionally to read detective stories. It always annoyed me how in the old-fashioned detective story, the detective always seemed to get at his results either by some sort of lucky chance or a fluke, or else it was quite unexplained how he got there. He got there, but he never gave an explanation how. So that doesn't seem to me quite playing the game. It seemed to me that he's bound to give his reasons why he came to his conclusions. Well, when I began to think about this, I began to think of turning scientific methods, as it were, onto the work of detection. And I used, as a student, to have an old professor, his name was Bell, who was extraordinarily quick at deductive work. He would look at the patient, he would hardly allow the patient to open his mouth, but he would make his diagnosis of the disease, and also very often of the patient's nationality and occupation and other points, entirely by his power of observation. So naturally I thought to myself, well, if a scientific man like Bell was to come into the detective business, he wouldn't do these things by chance. He'd get the thing by building it up, scientifically. So, having once conceived that line of thought, you can well imagine that I had, as it were, a new idea of the detective, and one which it interested me to work out. I thought of 100 little dodges, as you may say, 100 little touches by which he could build up his conclusions, and then I began to write stories on those lines.
Sherlock Holmes and his assistant Dr. Watson would make their debut in A Study in Scarlet in 1887. The stories would soon surge in popularity and would continue well into the 1920s, with 4 total novels, 56 short stories and a play forming the full canon. They've been adapted for the screen since the earliest silent days and remain as popular as ever. But the quintessential screen Holmes and Watson for most people remains Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce, who began a run of 14 films together, starting with a 1939 adaptation of The Hound of the Baskervilles.
Blessed if I know why on earth you want all these clippings about this Baskerville fellow. I've an idea, Watson, that young Sir Henry isn't destined for a very long existence in this world. What? My conjecture is that he'll be murdered. Murdered? It'll be very interesting to see if my deductions are accurate.
I've written a good deal more about him than I ever intended to do, but my hand has been rather forced by kind friends who continually wanted to know more. And so it is that this monstrous growth has come out of what was really a comparatively small seed. But the curious thing is how many people there are in the world who are perfectly convinced that he is a living human being. I get letters addressed to him. I get letters asking for his autograph. I've even had ladies writing to say that they'd be very glad to act as his housekeeper. One of them, when she heard that he had turned to the occupation of keeping bees, wrote saying that she was an expert at segregating the queen, whatever that may mean, that she was evidently predestined to be the housekeeper of Sherlock Holmes.
What do you make of it, Watson? Why should I make anything of it? The fellow came to see you. Ah, but what kind of a fellow? Let me hear you reconstruct it from his walking stick by our usual method of elementary observation. Well, I should say that Dr. Mortimer is a successful man. Well esteemed. Good. Excellent. I should say that he does a great deal of his visiting on foot, because the iron fellow is worn down. Perfectly sound. Let's have a look at this inscription. From his friends of the CCH. CCH. I should say that's something or other hunt. Really, Watson, you've excelled yourself. Did anything escape me? Almost everything, my dear fellow. Huh? A present to a doctor, I'd say, is more likely to come from a hospital than a hunt. And when the letters CC are placed before the hospital, the name Charing Cross Hospital rather obviously presents itself. You may be right. Furthermore, I'd say that Dr. Mortimer had a small practice in the country and was the owner of a dog. How can you tell that? Quite simple. From the teeth marks. Look, you can see for yourself. A rather large dog, I'd say. And unless I'm mistaken, Dr. Mortimer will call on us again in a few moments. Rubbish, Holmes. Rubbish. How the devil can you deduce that? Well, as he left his stick, isn't it reasonable to presume that he'll come back and get it?
Dr. Mortimer, sir.